Hi everyone. It's 6:30 and we have a sort of small window. Craig has been generous enough with us to let the Race Center have their speaker series here right now. And so thank you all for coming in. Just a quick heads up, we are recording. It's not, no one else is currently watching it, but it will be posted on the Race Center website in case you want to review or if you want anyone to catch the information. There are a handful of folks who weren't able to join us tonight. And this is part of the Race Cultural Center's speaker series. I apologize, I'm sucking on a cough drop because I'm at the tail end of a really yucky cough. So if I leave, I'm okay. Tonight we are very glad to have Dan Egan here with us, and I suspect most of you know a little bit about Dan. I am going to let him give his introduction and his resume because it would take me a little while. So he gets to pick and choose what he would like to share with the group. Without further ado, I will turn it over to you. Thank you again so much. I think we have one or two folks coming in, and we'll just do what we can to get them seated in here. So
thank you very much. Thanks. How's everybody doing?
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, perfect time.
There are
not sitting in the front row.
There's a tall chair right in the back for you.
Thanks for coming out. And this is really fun for me. Years ago, I would tour the country with a slideshow. I had 6 slide projectors before I could afford to make a movie. And they would be synchronized, and I would narrate it live. And Warren helped me with the narration. And one night, the screen tipped over in the middle of the show in Park City, Utah. And I called Warren up, and I said, Warren, the screen fell over in the middle of the show. He goes, well, that's all right. How many people were there? I said, 1. He goes, 1? He goes, yeah. Did they buy you dinner? I said, they did. He goes, you had a great night. You know? And that's kind of how it went with Warren and I. We were, he was amazing and a mentor to me. And it's really special for me to be here at Waterville Valley. I live down in Thornton on Upper Mad River Road. I've been here since 1994. It's my home now. And the valley holds so much for me. You know, as a kid, coming up here, seeing Wayne Wong ski, the World Cups, we used to come up with the Blizzard Ski Club, and we would ski and race NASCAR. And one time, my brother and I were going head to head, my younger brother Ned, and I fell. And you know, it tends to be a little slick sometimes around here, and I slid right under the timing shack. So, I've been on all sides of the equation. And, my brother John and I, we grew up in the streets, we grew up in Boston. And my mom's solution for getting a day off from 8 kids was the Blizzard Ski Club. She signed us all up for the ski club. And she even put my dad on the bus. And I would come home on a Sunday night. My mom would be so relaxed. I never saw her. Saturday night when we came home, But my grandfather, my mom's dad, lived on the highest hill in the city of Boston, in West Roxbury. And as kids, my mom, they had 1 pair of skis and a pair of leather boots, and they would ski down the medium strip of the parkway off that hill. And my dad lived in North Quincy, and he would walk 4 miles to the golf course to ski as a kid. And they went on one of their first dates at Blue Hills. And when we were kids, my mom bought a house on the hill. And she just kicked us out every day and, come back home for dinner. And that was pretty much the instruction. And we would snurf in the backyard, sled in the backyard, ski in the backyard. She'd get so tired of us bouncing up and down on the couches with our skis on to just get us outside. And my dad was a sailor. He grew up sailing in Walston Beach, guy in Quincy, and he kept his boat in South Boston. And from the age of 5, I would leave my house, walk a quarter mile to the trolley, take the trolley to Ashmont, take the train into Broadway, take the bus out to Southie, and walk the last half mile to the yacht club. And that's in the 70s. And it was a pretty rough neighborhood to walk through at the time. And, by the time I was 10, I was sailing all around the harbor and sailing racing. And, my parents taught us independence and confidence. And my book, 30 Years in the White Haze, the reference to 30 years is 30 years ago I was lost in a storm in Russia on Mount Elbrus. And the storm trapped 50 people and killed 15.
Wow.
And I was lost in the storm for 38 hours. And a Russian named Sasha found my snow cave and saved my life. I believe that night I met my guardian angels, I saw the bright lights, and the reason why he found me was my ice axe was outside the cave. And I'll show you some of that tonight, but I've never seen Sasha since. And the next day, him and I rescued 14 people. And really, it took me 30 years to put that trip into perspective and to write it down. In 1976, my brother John, who's 6 years older than I am, ran away from home. And he went to Sugarbush, Vermont, and landed a job washing dishes for $50 a week to be a ski bum. I was 12, and my mom forbid me to visit him. And so I would save my paper route money, go into South Station, buy a Greyhound bus ticket, and go up to Montpelier to visit him, and come home on Sunday and get in a whole lot of trouble. And years later, I told my mom. My mom used to tell me, Danny, it's not age appropriate for you to visit John. And I told her years later she was absolutely right. And so, he left Milton, Massachusetts with a pair of Hanson boots and a 150 Olin Mark IV. And 2 years later, he skied his first Warren Miller Friends.
Wow.
And the year after that, he's the only skier to this day to ski in the World Pro Race Tour and the World Pro Mogul Tour in the same season. He was 9th in the world in bumps. He was top 20 in the world in racing. And the Peugeot Race Tour used to come to Neshoba Valley. And John came home, and he stayed at the family home to race at Neshoba. And the morning he was walking out the door to go to Neshoba Valley, he had his race suit on. He looked at me and said, Danny, I'm going to work today. And I had never contemplated that there's more than one way to make a living. And here he was going skiing. And as a 14-year-old boy, that never left me. It just never left me. And so I was a pretty average skier, and knew I had this brother that was skiing, and I started racing in high school and those sorts of things. But my thing was soccer. I wanted to play soccer. And after 2 years, I finally got into Babson College. They were, they were dominant in the 80s. 5 national championships. I wanted to go to play with them. And I did that. And when I was in school, I decided I should take a semester off to go ski bum. And I called John at Sugarbush and told him I was coming up. And he said, I thought you were in college. And I said, no, man, I can't. I gotta get out of here. And he said, dude, you don't really know what you're doing. He said, this isn't, a walk in the park up here. He said, you can come up, but you have to promise me you'll go back to school. And so I went up, and then I would go back in the spring, go to summer school, play soccer in the fall, and take the next winter off. That was an eye-opener for me to see the world like that. And my first job was at the Elkin Inn, and when I showed up to work, the owner of the Elkin Inn, said, Dan, you're going to live in the chalet, and your roommate's over there. His name is Gary, but he doesn't like to be called Gary. Call him Tom. He said one other thing. He's not an escape convict. He's a wanted convict. He's a male stripper, but don't worry about that. So I went to the chalet, and as I knocked on the door to go in, here's Gary, Tom, throwing a knife against the wall, and it's sticking in the wall. I'm like, and I walk in, and I'm like, Tom, I'm your roommate. He goes, you're downstairs. I said, all right. And I went downstairs, and I went into the bathroom, and there's a hole in the ceiling. Now, Gary/Tom was the maintenance guy. And I said, Tom, there's a hole in the ceiling. He goes, yeah, the upstairs shower had a drain clog, and I fixed it. So that was my introduction to being a ski buff. And later that winter, Warren Miller came to town. And I was washing dishes and the phone rang, and it was Chan Weller, the marketing director at Sugarbush. And he said, Dan, is there any chance you have any clothing at all that doesn't have duct tape? And I said, no, but I bet I could borrow some. He said, well, if you can borrow something without duct tape, show up tomorrow, and Warren Miller's in town, and we called your brother and would like you guys to ski for the camera. Well, it was February vacation, so it was packed, and my parents were up visiting. And John and I got our first chance as the Egan brothers to ski for the camera. And it wasn't going very well. We kept crashing. And the cameraman was getting very upset. And we were skiing at Sugarbush North, and he said, I want you guys to ski upper FIS, which is a real steep, nice mobile run. He goes, and don't crash this time. If you fall, it's over for you Egan kids. And he went down the bottom, pointed the camera up, and at the bottom there's all these, people watching, and my parents. And they yelled, roll camera, and I dove in behind my brother, and we're bumping down, having a pretty good run. And about 3/4 of the way down, John hits a mogul, and he goes up in the air, and I can tell from where I'm skiing it's not going too well. He's got one leg up over his head, he's twitching around, looking me in the face. I'm like, oh, don't fall, dude. He explodes. I hit the jump, go over him, ski down to the bottom. The crowd is in hysterics. The cameraman's like, oh my God. My mom, and somebody in the crowd yells, who the heck raised these two characters? And I looked over at my mom, and she raised her pole, and she goes, they're my boys! And she hit the guy in the shin. And for me, that was like the stamp of approval, She said, lawyer, doctor, Indian chief, not happening, but maybe something here. And, John and I went on to, John's been in a total of 19 different Warren Miller films.
Wow.
Together, we did 13 together. And I'd like to show you a high-res light reel tonight. If you got to hang out with Warren Miller, you were a lucky person, because he gave you a lot of perspective on life. And one thing he said to me really early on, he said, Dan, if you hold on to your skis, they'll be like a jet airliner, and they'll take you all over the world. As we progressed in our career, Warren would say things to me like, Dan, there's no book that says you have to work here and live there. You can work and live wherever you want. That sort of big, open-minded thinking fit in perfect for me. I see the world as a small place. And it's that old saying, just say yes before you say no. And Warren was a big believer in that. And whenever there was an opportunity presented to me on my skis, I just said yes. You fire up. I was just a wide-eyed Irish kid punching it off every clip I could. I mean, just kind of hanging on and going for it and climb, ski, hawk, repeat. Most of those early movies, when I watch them, triggers all the memories for me. I go right back to it. I went to Warren in the 80s and told him I wanted to go all around the world wherever CNN was. And he loved that idea.
because Warren said that if everybody skied, there'd be no wars. So when I told Warren I was heading off to the Berlin Wall in 1989, he was like freaking out. We first came to Big Sky in the 80s, and this was a special spot. We drove up that road and we saw Lone Peak, and we were like, game on. At the Egan ski camps here at Big Sky, I teach skiing from the head down, not the feet up. I help people free themselves of their critical mind. Stop judging yourself. Don't let performance ruin a good day of skiing. I'm a skier. I ski. It doesn't matter to me if it's raining. It doesn't matter to me if it's foggy. I'm happy gliding on over into the snow. In my best ski runs, I'm floating somewhere above my head, watching myself ski.
So that's fun, reel, and this idea that we were going to go all around the world wherever CNN was. Warren called me up one summer. I was coaching a soccer camp, and he goes, "I want you to go to Portillo." And I just told the director of that soccer camp, "I gotta go. I'm out of here." And I flew out to Hermosa Beach, where the Warren Miller studios were, and I showed up early. Like I'm going to Portillo, and Warren says, "You're early." And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking he's going to give me the keys to the Audi, and I'm going to cruise the beach, And instead of giving me the keys to the Audi, he said, "Well, make yourself useful. Go sweep the editing room floor." And so I went into the editing room floor, and it was all his outtakes for his newest film. And I swept them up, and I had a big pile of film, 16 millimeter film, and I wasn't going to throw it away. This is Warren Miller footage. So I walked into his office. I'm like, "Warren, what do you want me to do with this?" He goes, "Go make a movie. You're the first kid to sweep the floor." And he said, "I've always wanted somebody to make a movie out of my outtakes." And so I went away and I made a little film out of his outtakes. And I showed it to him. And he liked it. He goes, now let's work on the narration. And Warren taught me how to narrate. And in my film, The Extreme Dream, it's the only movie that Warren ever skied in that was not his own. And I was left with having to narrate Warren Miller. And how do you do that? So I studied all of his narrations, and we went cat skiing with Warren at Jupiter Jones in Steamboat, Colorado, cat skiing. And when Warren showed up on the screen in my film, my narration was, 3,000 years ago, nothing roamed on these mountains except for the machines, except for animals as big as the machines that brought us up here today. And that is a Warren Miller narration. He pulls you back and moves you forward in 2 sentences. And that's what his films do, and they go right for the emotion, right for the heart. And, so I started making these little films with Warren, and that sort of, then a couple other things happened. One, VHS tapes and the VCR exploded onto the market. And Warren didn't know that much about VCR and VHS tapes. And I suggested to him that I should be the sales rep east of the Mississippi. And he said, okay. So every video store in the 80s east of the Mississippi was my account. And if you think back, every corner there was a video store. And so I launched a video distribution business out of my mom's attic. And started getting the rights, sales rights to every video I ever skied in, and then eventually the footage rights to the films. And the most famous Warren Miller shot, most viewed Warren Miller shot of all time is that cornice break that you saw. I'd like to show it to you again. John and I are skiing in Grand Targhee along the edge of Mary's when a piece of snow bigger than this room broke off over a 500-foot cliff. And I was first, and as I was skiing, I saw daylight, and I jumped over the daylight and landed on the cornice, and it broke. And next thing I know, I was skiing back onto the hill. To me, it was like hitting a wind drift. But John was behind me, and he saw it break. And when you watch the footage, you'll see that he stems, thinking he might stop. And realizing he wouldn't stop, he pushed. And that push saved his life.
Now I want you to watch very closely because a cornice as big as a 3-story apartment house is going to break off. Really? We can watch Dan knock down the cornice in front of John.
That's the hole I jumped over.
Now,
And he splits and breaks.
John stems and somehow manages to turn. But he's
And
only skiing on
turns in midair.
My goodness. Makes turning so nothing could happen.
And so they call it the hand of God turn. And it was pretty amazing. You know, we, as you know, when you ski for the films, you're just kind of given equipment to ski on. And for this particular segment, we were skiing on the Robbie Quantums. That was the ski with the plastic see-through tip. We nicknamed it the Robbie No Wantums because they were so soft. We were jumping some pretty big cliffs with that soft ski and just making it work. Come on in. Plenty of room.
There's the edge there.
Thanks for coming. Let's go. Good. And so the hand of God turn and the cornice break. It's an amazing. If you Google Egan cornice, you can watch it again. But that shot really was amazing, and we had no idea at the time, you know. But what's equally amazing about the fact that my brother turned in midair, and if you think about this, the cameraman didn't flinch.
Yeah.
The shot would have been ruined. He kept his eye through the viewfinder. He didn't flinch. I mean, those guys are amazing. If you ever watch footage where they throw, you know, dynamite, you know, the avalanche control, and you think about the cameraman not moving the camera before, you know, all of these sort of rigs that they have today, it's quite amazing what they can do. So on our journey around the world, we started going to places like Yugoslavia a week before the war started, the Julian Alps, Slovenia today, and doing, you know, couloirs and things like this. This ended up being a poster in Powder Magazine. The Berlin Wall. You know, if, like me, many of you, we're Cold War kids, right? The idea that the Iron Curtain would come down, I couldn't fathom it. That's like telling kids today there'll be no YouTube tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, that when that happened, it was such a thing to me that we could go there. So we were in Val d'Isère, France, shooting a film for a Japanese company, and after the film was done, like good ski bums, we decided to stay in Val d'Isère, France. And we didn't have much money, so we all packed into a very small apartment. There were 5 different nationalities living in the apartment, and the cameraman, his wife, and the 3-year-old baby. And as the British holidays came in mid-February, the landlord knew we were squatting in his apartment, said, "You guys got to go. I've rented the place." So we were like, where should we go? Well, first of all, how should we go? We had no car. So in Val d'Isère, Ewan Guinness, one of the great-grandchild of the Guinness family, happened to lose his license for the 7th time. And we're in the bar one night. John says to me, "Ewing lost his license." And I said, "Ask him what he's doing with his van. Can't drive it." So John went over and had a long conversation with Ewing, a couple of shots and some drinks, came back with the keys to the van. I said, "You bought it?" He goes, "I told him we'd test drive it." The next day, we loaded everybody in the apartment in the van, and we drove away. And somebody said, "Where are we going?" And I said, "Berlin Wall." And, Ewing didn't tell us that the van had no plates, the van had no insurance, and the van was unregistered. All was fine until we got to the East German border, and the East German guards wanted some papers. Well, the best we could do were Deutschmarks, and we decided we'd bribe our way into East Germany. And the cameraman with his baby in one hand and the camera in the other is filming me negotiating with the East German, and they let us through. And we were thinking we're pretty slick. What he did, the guard, was call his buddies, and they pulled us over every 10 kilometers with their hands out. So we paid a hefty price to get in. Of course, this is the west side of the wall because it has spray paint. In the film clip, it showed us running through no man's land. And to be in no man's land, where just months before people would have been shot and killed, was quite a thing. And when the East German guards came to us in no man's land, they didn't have their weapons. And we were a bunch of American kids in one-piece suits and headbands and skis. And they didn't know what the heck to make of us. They just pushed us, please go back to the West. If this is what's coming, we don't want it. So these photos went around the world. The Canon Mountain Tram jump, 1994, I became the director of skiing for Ski 93 here in New Hampshire. It was the first job I ever had. It required full-time skiing. When I came up here to New Hampshire, I was still living in my van, and I was on recovering from my fourth knee surgery. And my mom, one morning, had cut an ad out of the Globe. Executive director wanted. My mom had a great way of subtle hints. She had left it on my breakfast plate in the morning. So I got a hold of Joel Barassa up at Loon, and he said, "Are you serious? You want this job?" I go, I'm kind of banged up. And so he goes, "Well, even if you stay for 3 months, we'd love to have you, so come on up." And so we brought Warren Miller into town. And the state said it was okay for us to jump out of the tram. There was one condition: the doors had to be closed, so it said Canon on film before we jumped out. And right here, there's a metal ridge. And if I ever get to do this again, I would have built a ramp in there to get a little speed up. But instead, we were standing, like at the gate. And when they opened the doors, we had to get our feet over that metal ramp because otherwise you'd trip and end up on your head. So we jumped out twice. This is my friend Dean Deakus, and I brought that clip tonight. We shot this at Canon, Loon, Brentwoods, and here at Waterville Valley. And the whole trick was not landing on Dean. That's here at Waterville.
On Cape Cod, he drives a ready-mix concrete truck in between his jobs as a video cameraman.
That's Snow's Mountain.
The reality of it is, you your job in the city, move to a ski resort. No one is stopping you, but you.
So that's fun, right? And that was in the film Vertical Reality. A lot of fun to do that. One day-glow suits, big hair and headbands. That's my calling card. And that's one of my favorite suits of all time. I wish I still had it. By Degree 7. And the reason why I don't have it is how we used to get home at the end of every winter was we had the Egan brother spring sale out the back door of the van. And it became a thing, And we'd just sell all our kit and make our way home through the national parks. How we sort of launched our career was after we did that filming in '85 during February break. Later, after I got out of school, I was the night condo check-in guy at Sugarbush. And it was January, and it was playoff season, NFL playoff season. The Patriots were in the playoffs against the Broncos. And my dear friend Stan, was going to the game. And he was telling me he was going to the game as we were going up the chairlift. And I was baffled that somebody would go all the way out to Denver and not bring their ski gear. And he goes, well, I'm just flying out, quick trip. I said, Stan, let me drive your car out there. And I'll bring all your gear. And after the game, we'll go skiing. So by the time we got off of the lift, I had the keys to Stan's Blazer. I quickly quit my job as a night condo checking guy, drove to my brother's house where I was sleeping on his couch, and packed up Stan's car. And John came home. He was a contractor building condos in the valley. He goes, what are you doing with Stan's car? And why are you loading it? I said, Stan gave me the keys. I'm going to meet him in Denver. He goes, hold on. I'll go with you. So he called his building partner. He said, I'm not coming in. I'm going out west. And his partner said, well, I can't build without you. I'll go with you. And he jumped in the car, too. And our good friend Billy Rowland jumped in the car. We had a car full of guys. We had some gas money. We beelined it to the Rockies. Well, of course, we were broke. And we got in on a Thursday. And the game's not till Sunday. And my brother goes, let's go make some money. On Fridays at the Aspen Highlands, there's a mogul contest, and the winner gets $500. Let's go there. Now, I had never competed in moguls. I was a racer. We entered the contest at Aspen Islands as the Egan brothers from Vermont, sponsored by your mama and my mama. And John won $300 that day. And I was on 207 Rossi 7S's, GS skis, and my first mogul contest. And the guys in Aspen had recognized John from his days on the Saab World Pro Mogul Tour. And they said, you Egan boys out here for the start of the Pro Mogul Tour? And we said, absolutely. Where and when? And they said, it's tomorrow in Vail. We said, we'll see you there. We have Stan's car, by the way. So we got Stan's car, we had John's $300, we drove to Vail. And we entered the World Pro Mogul Tour, the Egan brothers from Vermont, sponsored by your mama and my mama. And the bump line was on Lukma in Mid-Vale. It's nasty. It wasn't a big snow year. It looked just like the East Coast to me. And there were 64 pros. And if you skied into the round of 32, you get entrance fee back. John and I skied into the round of 32, thought we were having the day of our lives. And then we went into the round of 16. John went out in the round of 16, and in the round of 16 I went up against Mean Dean, the bumping machine from Salt Lake City, Utah. And Mean Dean was legit. He had more patches like a NASCAR driver than I had ever seen. I had my GS skis, my baseball cap on backwards. I looked at him, I said, are you ready to rumble? And I beat him to the bottom. And I went into the round of 8. And in the round of 8, I'm riding up the lift with John. I'm like, I'm in the round of 8. He goes, I know. That's great. I go, what should I do? The same thing. Now, my brother's a real, he's a real deep thinker. Because when I was a kid, I had asked him, how should I learn how to ski moguls? He goes, it's simple, Dan. Ski as fast as you can until you crash. Get up and do it again. Before you know it, you're skiing all the way to the bottom without falling. So that was basically his approach to life, So in the round of 8, I went up against Kurt Rawls. Now the Rawls brothers, 3 Rawls brothers, Kurt Rawls, Mike Rawls, and Scott Rawls. Scott Rawls was Hannah Carney's coach. Okay, the Rawls brothers were legit mogul skiers. Kurt Rawls was ranked 3rd in the world, and here I am in the gate against Kurt Rawls. Baseball cap on backwards. Now you get into the rounds this deep, you're taking the boys' paychecks. They don't like that too much, And so I looked over at them and I winked. And they said go, and I got going. And I had them 3/4 of the way down, and my ski came off. But I had made it to the round of 8, and we won some money. And by that time, the whole crowd was chanting, your mama, my mama. And I kind of look at that day as the start of the Egans. We gave Stan his car back, and we took our winnings, and John went back to Vermont, grabbed his van, and drove back to Colorado, and we beelined for Squaw Valley. We had both ski bum there, and we had some friends there. And when we went into town, we just happened to ride into town the day there were tryouts for the North Face Extreme team. And we showed up at Elkin Meadows. We told them we were the Egan brothers from Vermont. We didn't have any sponsors. They said, well, this is your chance. What should we do? They said, there's a box of clothing, put on some North Face gear, and go up there and jump off cliffs. Sounds good to us. And at the end of the day, we signed our first contract as the Egan brothers with the North Face, and we're part of the North Face Extreme team. And if you go into the ski shop here in the village, there's a timeline for North Face. And on that timeline is the Extreme team, and it says the Egan brothers right on that timeline in the North Face shop. And that's kind of where it all started. And John had skied for Warren in a few films, and we had that debut in '85. And I had pestered John to call Warren Miller every day. And the 800 number for Warren Miller is 1-800-RAW-FILM, if anybody's interested. And he did, he called every day. And they got so tired of the Egans calling, they sent the intern up to film us. And the kid was so excited. He was an intern, had studied at UCLA film school. And we got on the tram, we got on the gondola with them. And we had a lot of fun on the ride up. I'll leave it at that. By the time we got out of the gondola, the intern was a little confused. And he left his camera on the gondola. And when he realized it, and it started going down, and he chased after it, my brother, the philosopher, said, we're going to work for Warren Miller Films for a very long time. That guy's never going to tell that story back at the office. And lo and behold, a week later, a real cameraman showed up and shot us in a segment in Squaw Valley. And the life and times of ski bumps, right?
Yeah.
It's so amazing. When I see this shot, I like to think about all the perfectly productive days I've wasted skiing. And what a joy it is to say that. You know, I think that my dad, at 5:30 on Saturday mornings, when he was loading all the Egans into the station wagon, somewhere in the back of his mind, he must have thought he was going to have a good day too. Right? I mean, every time we head to the mountains, there's that chance that this could be the day. The special day. The sun shining, blue sky, soft snow, good friends, right? And that allure of skiing is generational. It's got passed on to us, and we pass it on to others. And it's family. And I love that. When I close my eyes and I think about the sunny days here in the White Mountains, and you just know when you had them, and you savor them because they're sweet, you know? And that's one thing that I love about skiing. 1991, we skied with the Kurds during the first Persian Gulf War on the border of Iraq and Turkey in central Anatolia. And that was a real thing for me. We loved skiing in these war-torn areas because mountain cultures, people are just like us.
Yeah.
They want to ski. They want to be peaceful. They want to get to know you. And I got so hooked on this idea of mountains and peace and mountain cultures, I ran the 1993 Middle East Peace Ski. And I got it sponsored by the UN. And I got it sponsored by the American Arab League and Middle Eastern Airlines. Now, in 1993, it was illegal for Americans to go to Beirut. And my goal of the peace ski was to ski the highest peak in the Cedar Mountains in Lebanon with one representative from every Middle Eastern country. And so as we got going with this, the UN was telling me, we're going to need some security. You're going to have to go in advance to Beirut and meet with people and make sure that this thing is okay. So the American Arab League told me, don't worry about it. We'll get you in, and we'll make sure your passport isn't stamped. Okay. Middle Eastern Airlines told me, well, we can't have flights from the U.S., so book yourself a flight to Heathrow, go to the Damascus flight, tell them you're going to Damascus, and wink twice. They'll put you on the Beirut flight. I said, okay. So I packed up my gear, I went to Heathrow, I went to the Damascus gate, I go, I'm going to Damascus. Lady goes, you want to go this way? And she put me on the Beirut flight. I was the only American male on the flight. There were some American women who had married Lebanese, and they all got out of their seats and came up to me and urged me to get off the plane. They said, you are crazy, there's still hostages, and you should not be going to Beirut. But I was going. At the time, the gate for the airport was a mile away from the airport. They kept all the public a mile away. The runway in Beirut airport was still bombed out. There were planes and burnt things, and we landed. And immigrations was a cage. And when I went up to the immigrations and I gave them my passport, the lady said, Mr. Egan, we've been expecting you. She opened up my passport, put a piece of paper in, and stamped the paper. We had arranged the American Arab League to have a Christian Shiite meet me outside the cage. He did. He was fully armed. He said, get in the back of the car and duck down until we get through the gate. Came through the gate. He goes, you can sit up now. I said, where are we going? He goes, the colonel wants to meet you. So we went into Beirut. We came to a fully fortified house, sandbag, guns, guards, and everything. We came into a courtyard. He goes, you can get out of the car, but don't wander away. And he went into the house. It seemed like an eternity. And then the colonel came out of the house. And he walked up towards the car. And he said, Mr. Egan, my brother owns a gas station in Cambridge. And I said, Shell Station, Mass Ave? And he goes, yeah. I go there all the time, man. And we became fast friends. And he took me all around. We skied up at the Cedars. It was beautiful. But many of you remember the February of 1993 was the first World Trade Center bombing. When they drove the trucks into the parking lot with fertilizer and blew them up. And that derailed my peace ski. Nobody would go with me after that. But that was a lot of fun to think about. I love this shot. The colors, the freedom, the straight skis, the rear entry boots. I'm in front. My brother John in the back. You know, what I like to say about John is like, I'm a pretty good skier. My brother John's a special skier. He's just a kid that wakes up his whole life in shape. I have to work at it. He never played organized sports or anything like that. He could have been a gymnast, could have been anything he wanted, just knew how to land on his feet. Self-made guy. After a few years of ski bumming at Sugar Bush, he learned how to drive a truck and would haul produce out of Oswego, New York, May through November, and then ski all winter. And that's how he afforded his skiing. And my mom, who was still telling me it wasn't age appropriate to visit him in Oswego, before I got my license, I was 15, I broke out my 10-speed and said, I'm going to visit John. My dad, who was not always the most optimistic guy, said, I'll pick you up in Brockton. Finally, people get that joke. And, a week later, I made it all the way to Oswego. And after a month of working on the apple orchard up there on Lake Ontario, my mom talked my oldest brother, Bob, into going to get me because she thought I'd never come home. In the yellow is Robbie Huntoon from Killington, Vermont, famous mogul skier, and Steve Warren, cameraman. But he's also the stunt double in Hot Dog, the most famous Hollywood ski film of all time. And if you go back and watch that movie, I encourage that. There was some amazing stunts. They went through the windows, they jumped over the gondolas, and that's one of the most amazing opening sequences of all time is Robbie Huntoon. Now, to say that ski bums aren't successful would be a pretty shortcoming of a statement. In the background is Rob Delorier, Bolton Valley Deloriers, and their dad owned Bolton Valley. Rob, we used to run these camps, the advanced ski clinics with the extreme team. And at our camps, Robbie, who had gone to Cornell School of Management, met a guy who owned some land at the base of the Tram at Jackson. At another camp, he met a guy who had a pretty big wallet. Put a deal together and has since built the 3 biggest hotels in Jackson Hole.
Wow.
And Rob's doing okay. Rob's doing okay. So it's a great story. This is Sasha, who saved my life in Russia. I like to say my white light experience got interrupted by a 6'4" Russian. The trip to Mount Elbrus in Russia was sponsored by Degree 7. Degree 7 is a clothing company out of France. And the founder of Degree 7 was Patrick Valentin, the godfather of extreme skiing. Patrick Valentin was my brother John's ski hero. And in 1986, John was filming with Warren Miller in Verbier, Switzerland. And after the film shoot, they went to Chamonix and hung out for 2.5 months. And they would follow Patrick around Chamonix. And one day, John was thumbing through town, and Patrick picked him up. And John couldn't believe that Patrick Valentine had picked him up thumbing. And he got in the car, and he was so excited, and Patrick started to laugh. And John said, "Excuse me, Mr. Valentine, why are you laughing?" He says, "Well, you kids have been following us around, all around Chamonix. Glaciers, steep couloirs, all this sort of stuff." And John's like, "Yeah, it's been amazing." He goes, "But why are you laughing?" Because you Americans don't have a rope. And the sad, ironic piece of that is a year later, Patrick died without a rope. And so the company, John wanted to be sponsored by Degree 7. And so when they started being distributed here in America, John had driven me to the SIA ski show in Las Vegas back in the time. And John's, again, philosophical guy. He said, "You went to that college, get in that trade show and make us some damn money." So I set up some meetings with companies that were based around the Boston area. The first one was with Fisher Skis. And I went and had the meeting, and I came out and I said, "Here, sign this." He goes, "What's this?" I go, "It's our contract with Fisher. They're going to pay us." "Pay us? What the heck did you tell them?" I said, "I told them we were the Egans. We're going to ski around the world and make movies." He goes, "Tell the next guy that." And he dragged me from booth to booth, telling me to repeat that to whoever would listen to it. And one of the companies that listened to it was Degree 7. And Degree 7 wanted to have a celebration of Patrick's life. So they wanted the extreme guys from the U.S. and the extreme guys from Chamonix to meet in Russia, of all places, during the Cold War in 1990, when it was still the USSR. They ran a worldwide contest that if you bought one article of clothing, you got entered into this contest and could win a trip to Russia. One of the climbers I was lost with had bought a beanie and was on the trip. They were bankers, they were teachers, they had no experience. And it's 18,000 feet. And the Chamonix guides who had come from the Patrick Valentin's troops, climbing school, they weren't that interested really. They were chain smoking Frenchies, and they really weren't that interested. I wanted to go to the summit. The storm was so violent the night before the summit attempt, it blew the door off of the refuge. In the morning, the storm cleared, and I was going to the top. My brother didn't want to go. But I went, and I followed a French journalist to the top. And being young, I did not turn around at the turnaround time and kept going. And that's how I found myself stranded for 38 hours in the ice field and the crevasses. And it was, amazing, hard, long time period. I dug my snow cave with my feet and my ice axe and crawled into it and thought I'd probably never come out. My friend Claudio Bate from Italy, he died alone in a snow cave. And how they found him was his hand was sticking out of the snow. He was alive when they found him, but the Russians didn't have helis, and they just threw him on the sled with the other bodies, and he died on the descent. If Sasha hadn't found me, I don't think I would have made it. It's quite a story, and it's all throughout the book. I love this picture of John and I. One, the colors. Two, the brothers. You know, when the cameramen would see how close we would ski together, they loved it.
Yeah.
You know, I could ski behind my brother towards a cliff, and I could tell from his pole plant or his head where he was going and how fast he was going there. And that sort of sixth sense that brothers have, you know, really is what made our career so special. And to do that with him around the world. I've been teaching camps really since the early 90s. And my steep camps that I run in Big Sky or the trips I run to Zermatt, Engelberg, Lax, Switzerland, and Val d'Isère, France, I teach to free yourself from the critical mind. I believe in teaching skiing from the top down, not the bottom up. I don't believe skiing is technical. I believe the key to a good coach and a good guide is to understand your purpose. Why are you on the hill? What is it that you want to achieve? Do you want to ski with your kids, your grandkids? You want to go heli skiing in Alaska? You want to learn how to ski the powder better? What is your purpose? And then I look for, what is your emotional attachment to the purpose? What do you feel about that? Then I look for the commitment. How committed are you? If you found me, you're pretty committed, you know? And then I teach technique last. Because if I know your purpose, I'll teach the technique that will get you there. And I know your commitment and your emotional attachment. And of course, that is all about the flow state. And this video sums it up. Oh, before we do that, that's all the places I traveled and skied around the world. It's in the back of the book. All the places I've skied and sailed. And this is the flow state. To really feel the G-force of a turn is a special thing. It's a gift. When I enter into that flow state and I actually get to that point where I'm just doing it. It's me doing it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not reacting to it. I'm just in the moment. But you have to be willing to let go of judgment. Yeah. For me, flow state is the time and the space, the silence between the notes. For me, it's a transition between the turns. And I think once you engage yourself in gravity, in fall line skiing, flow is just a normal, everyday result of that. And I believe that skiers are here to complement the landscape, that we should make it prettier. I need to find my flow state so that I can enter back into the place of my youth. Well, the beauty of youth, right, is not knowing. That's the beauty of it. So when you look at Jack and you look at some of these kids ripping it up, they are in it. So when you watch a beautiful skier ski, you're seeing something. You're seeing the performance. You're seeing the dance. You're seeing the flow state. You know, skiers are seekers. They're seeking something. Whether young or old, when that's discovered, that seeking becomes a driving force in their life. They're not satisfied with that one little touch. They're going to do it again. Big Sky is a very, very special place. There's a belonging here. And in the belonging, there's a becoming. And what's so beautiful about what people belong to is that when they become, they discover. And once you hone the skills to ski Liberty Bowl or to drop into Lenin, you understand, because every day the experience is different. Every day the experience brings wonderment. And it introduces you into an alpine environment that is the definition of flow. I love that idea that we enter into a place of our youth through skiing. Joy.
Yeah.
You know, joy. I mean, that's ultimately why we do it, right? My first run of the day I called the morning glide. Just feel it, you know? Doesn't matter the temperature, doesn't matter the conditions. I just want to go out and touch it, feel it, and float, you know? And when you start to do that, free of judgment, you really come into the moment of what it's all about, you know? And that's really, really what I love about it. And tonight I have a couple of things. I've got only a few of the ski bum films, but this is the movie we made on Warren Miller. It was the last interview Warren ever gave before he passed. It's an amazing movie. It tells all about his story. You can find it on Amazon as well, streaming, but it's really amazing. Many of you know Bill Fallon. He's the skier on the sign, right? Birthplace of freestyle skiing. This is the book we wrote together, Courage to Persevere. Billy had 52 hours of brain surgeries, and really, not many people know this, but he has the cognitive ability of an 8-year-old. And Billy walked and talked and taught himself how to ski and ride motorcycles again through the martial arts. And this is a story about Waterville Valley, Cape Cod, and the Fallon family. And you'll recognize many, many characters in this book. And then, of course, 30 Years in a White Haze. But before we get into all that, maybe there's questions or conversation before we do that.
I'm amazed that you're still alive.
My mom would, she would never drop us off at the airport. She'd only pick us up.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what do you still have to accomplish?
It's a great question. I love that. Thanks for asking that. Somebody told me that this would happen. Maybe many of you have experienced it. I didn't believe it in my 40s, but they said when you turn 50, something will happen to you. And when I turned 50, I realized I had nothing left to prove. And it was very, very freeing for me. And my mission statement is to help others do what I've already done. And so that's, you know, I'd always wanted to tell the story. I never wanted my story to end with the Elvis trip. I wanted it to begin, because really it's the start of my adult life. And my next project with Eric Wilbur, Eric's a sports writer for the Globe, both of us write for the Globe. And our next project is called Dying to Ski. It's about all our lost friends, Shane McConkey, Doug Coons, there's 30 of them. And we're looking at this idea of progression that the kids are doing because they're getting hurt. And this idea that sport was designed to enhance our lives, not end it. And it asks this very simple question: is dying doing what you love a good death? And we don't answer that in the project, but we let it kind of play out. The story is told through all the survivors of the lost, and it's a pretty powerful film and book. And so I'm excited about that. But really, it's new adventures for me. My current film project is called Transforming the Beautiful Game. It's about racism in soccer, and I'm telling the Clyde Best story. Clyde he's the Jackie Robinson of the English Soccer Premier League, and won a championship in the 70s with the Rowdies, and I'm telling the Clyde Best story. It's pretty neat. Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us one of your sailing stories.
Oh, nice. Well, my good buddy Rob here and I are great friends and ski coaches and sailors. I love to sail. I did the Bermuda Race when I was 16. My older brother Bobby and I did the race. And that's the worst, still on record, storm of the Marion to Bermuda Race was that race. A boat sank during that race, and our friend who was the navigator on the boat that sank spent 18 hours on a life raft. The reason why it took him so long to find was there was conflicting eBirds signals. There was a derelict boat out floating that distracted But that night of the storm was the biggest waves I'd ever seen. I had never really sailed off shore, and I was on watch, 3 a.m. or whatever, and I remember driving the boat up. We were sailing with Jack Westerbeek diesel engines, a bit of a yeller, Jack, and he was a asleep, and he had really coached us on how to roll the boat down the back of these waves. But I froze on this one wave, and I dropped the boat into the trough and shook the whole boat, woke Jack up. And he came out looking for blood, you know, he was mad, he was a yeller, you know. And it was a hard sail. And when we got to Bermuda, the navigator on the boat, I called him the navigesser, he said to me, "How was the trip?" And I go, "I loved it." He goes, "Loved it? You look miserable a lot of the time." I go, "That's how I know I loved it." Because you're willing to suffer. And yeah.
Was there a skier that, other than your brother, who, when you skied with them, was an inspiration to you?
Yeah, lots. You know, I love that. There was a whole group of ski bums from the 70s that lived with John and Sugarbush that were just unbelievable skiers and really, really passionate about it. And I've been lucky to ski with just some amazing skiers. These days, the skier that really gets me jazzed is Marcus Caston. Return to Turn.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. He's a great skier, younger guy. But really, back in the day for me, you know, I just did it on my podcast. I just have James Young, Joseph's son, on it. And, you know, that was great to have him on the podcast because he really talked about Waterville Valley and the history of the Austrians here. And for me, Paul Villar, Canon, and Sunapee, their ski school, Egan Zimmerman ski school here. You know, the Austrians made us drill. We did drills as kids. And that's what I remember. And that's what I think gave us our technical background, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, Robbie.
Been thinking about it a lot. I've asked you a lot of questions. When is the last time you had to buy a lift ticket?
Well, the times I do, I now do joyfully. Because I'm grateful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had a lot of free lift tickets. And I know we got a few ski industry people in here, former or still present, but my thing about this past mayhem is I'm not sure why we're punishing the day ticket holder and why we're discounting to the core market. I don't think that's sustainable in the long run. I don't think the first thing we should say to the guy that walks up to the lift ticket window is, you know, you could have got a discount. He doesn't want to hear it. I think it's an insult. But to answer your question, I think last year I bought a ticket. Yeah. I'm not afraid to throw the money down. I'd rather pay my tickets than my speeding tickets. Yeah.
Grateful.
Why do you live in Thornton?
Oh, thank you. I love it. Yeah, I winter in Big Sky these days. But I love Thornton. I'm in the Waters house, Herbert Waters and Bertha Waters, and it's a beautiful property. And yeah, for me, I've never wanted to live in the West. And, you know, they call this Shangri-La. And it is. You know, we have it all here in the Whites.
Yeah.
And I agree, you know, it's just, so when I leave here, they've been great now during COVID. We didn't stay. But now I was just in London or wherever I am, and sometimes I think, I don't see this many people in 3 months in Thornton, New Hampshire. People laugh when I tell them I have one stoplight between here and Boston. You know? But mainly I love it. Yeah, love it. Yeah.
What's your favorite ski run?
Oh, man.
Anywhere. Yep.
Well, you know, my answer is like I love to ski. But my favorite ski run, you know, Lone, of course, promoting Big Sky, Lone Peak's amazing. The tram goes to the summit. It's only 15 people at a time going to the summit. It's one of the few places in North America you can ski alone. And when you drop into the big couloir there, it's special. 1,600 plus vertical with nobody skiing over here, no moguls. It's great.
Was that the shot that was in?
Yeah.
That's an amazing shot.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And, you know, I love that. But for me, nothing matches the Alps. You know, I spend every spring in Val d'Isère. I go the whole month of April. To ski 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 vert uninterrupted is unbelievable. I also take trips over to Engelberg, and the famous run in Engelberg is the Laub. And the Laub is the perfect pitch powder run. And when you're on those types of slopes, and again, it's untracked, when you go into a valley and you're alone, wow. My story on that, there's a guide in Val d'Isere that I know that when I'm guiding and I'm in the same zone and I see Alto, I'm having a good day. I've chosen right. So this one, we ski this big valley down to the canyon. It's a gorge, and it's a one track through the gorge with open water. You gotta be careful. And I get my crew down to the gorge, and I look up and I see Alto coming. And I'm like, oh, we are in the right spot today, you know? And I tell my gang, we gotta beat that group through the gorge. Let's go. We push, we pull, and we get through the gorge. And we get through, and they all say, why did we have to beat the group through the gorge? And I say, 1 minute, you know. And Aldo comes, oh, hey, Dan, hey, Aldo. And he takes his group, they say hi, and they ski away. I go, we had to beat him through the gorge because I knew he had the rope. And if one of you guys went in the river, I wanted him coming after you know?
Thank you so much, Dan. We have just a few minutes. We need to be watch
Okay.
our timing for being in this space. So I'd love to give folks time to talk with Dan, have some book signing, and again, thank you all so much. Hang out a few more minutes. I don't mean to shoo everybody out, but yeah, talk amongst yourselves.
Thanks so much. This is really good. Thank you. I need to come back. Oh, they are great. No, I want to. Yeah.
So, I'm very excited. Snows. What about snow? Have you been up there?
Dude, after like yesterday,
It's unbelievable. You won't even recognize
the
it.
face. Did you go?
I saw it yesterday morning before they cut, then I saw it this morning after they cut.
So you didn't go with them? Because like
I was going, my battery did, my battery
on a
went.
Rough Rider too.
So I hiked up this Snows Mountain Trail, and I kind of
Yeah.
looked